Hi, I'm Chris Freeman. I teach at Kellam High School here in Virginia Beach, and today I want to be talking to my students really about how to add some layers that are going to help them with the project that they've been working on, this Own-It project right here. And I want to hone in today on question number 2. Document how stormwater exits your site, which would be our school, and trace the drainage flow to the watershed. Okay, so we're going to be doing this through ArcGIS, and hopefully by now you have a really nice, actually more filled in than mine, um, aerial with a perimeter of your school and all these quadrants that you've developed that have different information associated with them that will get at the area of permeability and non-permeability of our school site. And more on that later. But for now, what I want you to do is to add some interesting layers. So you might want to start a new map, or you might want to experiment with turning layers on and off um, onto the map that you've already created that goes over the area of your school. So we're going to search for layers, and we don't want to do this in my content. We want to do this in ArcGIS Online. So we're going to go all the way down to the bottom here and click on ArcGIS Online, that last tab. And we want to hone in on a search, so we're going to search for layers. And I'm just going to type in watershed. And why did I put a space between watershed? There we go. And let's just click on this very first one and add that to my map. And I want that to stay there, so I'm going to exit out of here. And I want you to notice something that's really, really interesting about this watershed defining line. That almost 100% of our school's water is flowing over here to West Neck Creek. Now, all of our school's water is going to eventually end up in Back Bay, but it has two zones to get to Back Bay. One is through West Neck Creek, and the other, look at this little tiny quadrant, this little tiny section of forested area at the very, very bottom of our school property, right here. That, waiting for it to load. Oh, I must have clicked right on the line, so let me just click off that. That is going to the Upper North Landing River. And so it's interesting that a very small quadrant of our school actually drains to a completely different location and then eventually ends up in Back Bay. But this tiny little stretch of land of our school property is going to a different part of our watershed. Now, if you walk around this property line, you're not going to notice any change in topography. So it's just really interesting that this little tiny stretch of land does something different. And we wouldn't have known that had we not put in this ArcGIS web layer onto our maps. So you can zoom out and sort of try and figure out how that would get there. And that's sort of another interesting story because we have quite a few neighborhoods, and I don't see any direct path for water to flow. So it's either going through stormwater or groundwater to slowly make its way to the North Landing River. And so that's something that is fascinating that we can try and explore further, and that you should think about including as part of the story in your map. Everybody should have that piece of the puzzle in here. That's going to make for some definite interest, and you can try and tailor make a map and some interesting content into your story map to help tell this tale. So that's one piece of the puzzle. You should be thinking about embedding a watershed boundary content into your map. Now, I want to go over another thing that you should search for, and simply by typing Virginia Beach into your map, you can come up with the very first thing here, which is storm drain marker. And think about just exploring a little bit with things that you can type and add in. Maybe we want to add this in. Maybe that will give us an understanding of where storm drains are, and that maybe water is going to flow from these storm drains to different locations. Maybe it won't. We want to remove that. Maybe you want to explore some other maps. But the idea here is that just by typing in Virginia Beach, you can begin to see what other things might be interesting for you to add to a map that will get at water flow. Maybe you want to put in wetlands and see what wetlands we have here. Maybe you want to look at some other layers, but think about either adding some interest beyond just at Kellam, and think about expanding out into our surrounding watershed, getting information that will help tell the story of how water flows off of Kellam and through Virginia Beach. So we need to think historically how that happens for question 4, and we need to think about how water leaves our site in question 2, and then for question 5, you need to create a proposal. And that is going to be an important piece of this. It's worth 20 points, and everything else is worth, there's only 2 that are really worth 20 points. So when I look at our site and try and think about what students could create that would be extra special at Kellam, I think about these front sections, these front ponds. And maybe there could be something that is planted as submerged aquatic vegetation in these ponds, or something that is done that would be extra special in the parking lot where we have water drainage here. So that might be something to consider. Maybe you're going to consider something else. In the past, we have had students work on planting extra trees on the Kellam property so that we can suck up groundwater and sequester more carbon. Those are some novel ideas that you could consider, but really you need to be thinking through what could be an action step that we could take to make Kellam more water friendly. All right, so I'm going to leave it here. I think you now have a better understanding of what layers you can add and how water leaves our school site. And hopefully this will help you make your project a little better, particularly in pertaining to question 2. And hopefully this will also give you things to think about that maybe you can type in to look for maybe historic layers that you could add in before answering question 4. All right, now when I get back and see you guys next, we're going to be going outside and we're going to be working on answering question 6 together by doing a little field study and then putting some of that data into a computer. So best of luck, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have been up to when I see you next. Thanks.